Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. My friends, exciting week coming up for the American people. We have obviously the inauguration of President Trump coming on. I will tell you that I personally am very excited in hopes for the real change for the American people. And that we can drain the swamp, as he likes to say, and clean up some of this corruption. The following week, I was going to do it this week, but there was too much going on. We're going to have our good friend and very wise person, Bill Flick, on with us, and we're going to be discussing some of the things that I think personally, and I'm sure Bill will have his own insight as to what we believe Donald Trump needs to do to get out of the strings, out of the chains, actually, of these international bankers. And of course, as Ansar Rothschild said, give me control of a nation's currency, I care not who makes its laws. Well, one of the things that Donald Trump is going to have to do is educate the American people on the money system, or as I like to say, lack of money system, and take away the control of the medium of exchange, the issuance of the medium of exchange, from the private for-profit bank, Federal Reserve. So that's for next week. This week, my friends, I want to open up with a couple of things that I want to get into. And at the very end of the program, I may be cutting some things short because I have got to discuss with you what happened to a Trump advisor by the name of Roger Stone. Okay, so let us begin. A real quick thing here. U.S. politics summed up in 30 seconds. This comes from the website Hang the Bankers. This is very good. Now, before I read this, I want you to understand I am not a Republican, I am not a Democrat. That is just part of the divide paradigm. The Democrats are completely Marxist. They are financed by international bankers, and so on the hierarchy of the Republican Party. But there is a difference, my friends, at the grassroots level. This little summary here that I'm about to read to you is not touching on the grassroots level. This is all got to do with the hierarchy of both parties. Article, U.S. politics summed up in 30 seconds. Now this is obvious, this is supposedly a conversation, a fictional conversation between a Democrat and the Republicans. Democrat, the Russians hacked our elections. Republicans, you mean they exposed your corruption? Democrats, we're not corrupt. There's nothing in the hacks that's illegal. Republicans, so how did the hacks change the election then? Democrats, because Hillary would have won if the people were kept in the dark. Republicans, that doesn't make any sense. Green Party, that's why we need a recount. The Russians hacked our election. Republicans, so you mean the Russians hacked our voting machines and changed the outcome? Democrats, yes. U.S. intelligence, no, they didn't. Democrats, so it was the email hacks that changed the election, and it was the Russians who did it. WikiLeaks, no, it wasn't. Democrats, the intelligence community says they have proof. U.S. intelligence, no, we don't. Democrats, you said you did. U.S. intelligence, no, we said we were confident based on past Russian behavior. There is no actual proof that the Russian government ordered any hacks. Democrats, well, we're going to blame them anyway, and before we leave the White House, we're going to place sanctions on the Russians. This way, Trump is forced to continue our policy on Russia, because if he lifts the sanctions, it will make him look like he's colluding with them. This will poison the well on Trump's foreign policy on a wide range of issues from Syria to European natural gas negotiations. And then there's some language here I do not wish to use, but then at the very end of it, it says, call CNN and let them know how to spin this. My friends, this is a fictional thing, but it really sums it up quite well, is the reason why I presented this to you. There is no evidence. As a matter of fact, there's evidence proving the Russians did not hack the DNC. And they didn't have to hack the DNC, my friends. You know why? because it was open. All they had to do was put money into the drop box known as the Clinton Foundation, and they could have had all the information that they wanted. Okay, I want to read to you some quotes. I'm going to be real brief here. These quotes have to do, we've done a lot of quotes over the years with regards to historical quotes, Louis T. McFadden and many, many others. But some of these names you will recognize. These are people currently in the government or tied up into the banking industry. Now, this first one is from Donald Trump. Nobody knows banking better than I do. My friends, I hope that is correct, and I hope he is talking about the fraudulent lack of money system that we have today. And this is what's my opening thing with you that we're going to get into very heavily next week, is that if Donald Trump is going to bring prosperity, true prosperity, back to this nation, and the world for that matter, he has got to, number one, audit the Federal Reserve, bring out their crimes, their criminal behavior, their lying, their deceit, their corruption. He's got to educate the American people on the mechanics of our lack of money system. And he can start with many of the documents that are out there. The money mechanics document put out by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago would be a good place to start when they get into the mechanics of our money system, or as I like to say, lack of money system, and how the fraud is placed upon the American people. That would be a great place to start. So I included that statement from Trump because I am hoping that this is what he's talking about. Okay. Now, this is from Raina Fuhar, big banker. The finance industry creates 4% of jobs, but takes at least 25% of the profits in corporate America. Do you understand what this person's saying? This is Elizabeth Warren. A bank CEO should not be able to oversee a massive fraud and simply walk away to enjoy his millions in retirement. Again, Elizabeth Warren. Wells Fargo's John Stoff is leaving with all his ill-gotten millions. That's still not real accountability. Absolutely true. I do not agree with Elizabeth Warren on 99% of what she portrays, but I do agree with these two statements. The goose that lays the golden egg has been considered a most valuable possession. But even more profitable is the privilege of taking those golden eggs laid by someone else's goose. The investment bankers and their associates now enjoy that privilege. That is Louis Brandeis, another banker. Banking was conceived in inequity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money, and with the flick of the pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. If you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money. Absolutely true. I know we've read that to you before. And Joseph Stomp, for those of you that don't remember his name, was a former Bank of England president. And he was also very much a liaison with the Rothschilds banking dynasty. Now, this is Senator now, Bernie Sanders. It is not Congress which regulates Wall Street, but Wall Street that regulates Congress. The solution? The major Wall Street banks must be broken up, and I will introduce legislation to do that. Senator Bernie Sanders. Folks, you wonder why Bernie got robbed, stolen, usurped from the election? Bernie Sanders won the Democratic nomination, folks, in reality. They weren't going to let him in. He co-wrote, the bill to audit the Fed with Ron Paul. He was trying to put in things like he's talking about right then. The bankers aren't going to let him in. No way. Again, Bernie Sanders. Top bankers have shown no shame for their bad behavior and have made no apologies to the public. The billions and billions of dollars of fines they have paid for financial fraud are just another cost of doing business, another shortcut to unjust profits. Totally agree, Mr. Sanders. Again, Bernie Sanders. Wall Street put billions of dollars in lobbying and campaign contributions to get the government off their backs. They got the government off their backs. Turns out that they were crooks and they destroyed our economy. I think it's time to put the government back on their backs. Bernie Sanders. And I will tell you, my friends, that, the government protected the bankers. The government was never on the bankers' back. The government is a tool to manifest protection for the bankers, and it's also a tool to keep the little people little through the use of debt. Bernie Sanders again. Business model of Wall Street is fraud. In my view, there is no better example than the recently exposed illegal behavior at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, I can go on and 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 mention all the banks. That's a very small demonstration of it, you want my opinion. Wells Fargo fleecing, this is John Chang. Wells Fargo fleecing of its customers by openly fraudulent accounts for the purpose of extracting billions in illegal fees demonstrates at best a reckless lack of institutional control and, at worst, a culture which actively promotes wanton greed. That is John Chang. If you don't know who John Chang is, he's a fabulous author, and he's a very courageous author. Some of our banks had shown themselves either incompetent or dishonest in their handling of the people's funds. They had used the money entrusted to them in their own speculations, profits, and unwise loans. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1932. Has anything changed? Zero. You know what has changed? In 1932, we still had some intrinsic value in our money. In other words, gold and silver. What happened in 1933, particularly March 9th, 1933, all the gold and silver was usurped from the American people. We had a irredeemable paper note placed upon us. We are the co-sureties to that debt. It's why you bond your children with the birth certificate. And the bankers profit. They've taken over countries. They've caused numerous wars for their own booty. Booty is a legal term which means profit by conquest. Do you remember pirates? We gotta go hide the booty. It's a legal term, Old English law. Okay? So nothing has changed except the bankers have profited more. They're protected more from the government. You're deeper in debt. You don't own your land anymore because of Senate Document 43, which took place on March 9th, 1943, when all property, not just land, all property, and that includes human resources like your children and yourself, because you've been bonded through a birth certificate, to the international bankers. Actually, when you look at the top of the pyramid, you know who owns your birth certificate? The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. Do you know who owns your land? The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. Do you know who holds all the bonds through the Risk Management Office from the different insolvent corporations, State of Vermont, USA Inc., whatever? Bank of International Settlements, Basel, Switzerland. Do you know who owns your vehicle? State of Vermont or State in fill the blank? But that is an insolvent corporation to who? The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. Let us continue. Now this is a heavy-duty banker. This is a former J.P. Morgan. He was a compliance officer in charge of the compliance division. Listen to this. Until you start sending people to jail, the pockets are there to satisfy the penalties. It's not until the ends don't justify the means, that you may start seeing people thinking differently. How many bankers have gone to jail? Zero, none. And the fines? The fines are part of doing business, my friends. Do you understand that when they say part of doing business, the fines that they know they are going to incur, so the Department of Justice can make themselves look like they're doing something against the bankers? No one goes to jail because this is an understanding. You see? This is all understood. So they just put a fee into all of their assets and work that they do, so they can cover the fines that are agreed upon before this whole corruption begins by the Department of Justice and the particular banks. They have fees incorporated into their processes to cover the known fines that are coming down the road. So the Department of Justice can say, look, we're slapping them hard, people. Who's paying these fines? You and I, as part of fees. It's just like the pharmaceutical companies. You can't sue the pharmaceutical companies because they're protected by the government, but there is a vaccine court that you can go to. Now, who's putting the funds into the vaccine court, which, by the way, the last time I looked it up, is paid $3.8 billion in fines and penalties to people for dead children and all the rest of it. But who's putting into this court, this civil private court, to have these funds available? You and I. You buy an aspirin, a percentage of the cost of that aspirin, a percentage of that goes to this court fund. So the pharmaceutical companies don't have to pay anything, just like the bankers. You and I are paying their fees for them, and this, just like the bankers, the pharmaceutical companies put these fees into their all their makeup of doing business. Understand this. When banks extend loans to their customers, they create money by creating debt to their customers' accounts. Mervyn King, another big banker. Bankers, bankers, bankers. Oh, speaking of fines to banks, let's read this quote from George Collins before we get into this. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I will tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That does not help them. That's against their interest. Mr. George Collins, absolutely 100% correct. And how do they do this? They do this through the mainstream media. They do this through the indoctrination centers that you call public schools. You call it public school system. I call it public fool system. And they do this through intimidation. And they do this through the Hegelian dialectic, where they create crisis to get that emotional response they want from you. And they bring in their solution, which always reduces your liberties, your freedoms. It taxes you more, and it creates more security for the corrupted crooks that run this government. Speaking of fines. Now, remember this web that you're seeing on your screen now? And we pointed, this is Deutsche Bank, and in the center of this web is the web of all the different banks and lending institutions and financial institutions that are tied into Deutsche Bank. And that's why when Deutsche Bank crumbles, and it is crumbling, it's going to be so detrimental throughout the financial community. And we also, when we did a show on this chart, we broke down to you that every single other institution you see on this chart received funding from that $28.3 trillion of the bankers' bailout in 2008. Every single one of them. Headline: Deutsche Bank agrees to $7.2 billion settlement over mortgage fraud. No one going to jail. Deutsche Bank has agreed to a $7.2 billion settlement with U.S. Department of Just Us over its sale and pooling of toxic mortgage securities in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis. Folks, understand this. I've already cut too much time, but I want you to understand something. Where do you think they got the $7.2 billion? Very simple. From you. From you. They were a big winner in the 28.3 trillion that we know of that went to the bailouts for the bankers. That's your money. That's your sweat equity. They got it from you. And believe me, my friends, if they paid $7.2 billion, they made trillions in profits. And by the way, all these toxic mortgage securities, when all these people got tossed out of the land or the property that they think they own, which they don't own, and if you don't believe me, my friends, go to your deeds. Go to your deeds. Number one, do you have a certificate of title or a lordal title? If you have a lordal title, which I know you don't, because before 1933, people had a lordal title. A lordal is Latin for absolute. You owned it. You didn't have to go register with the corporation, insolvent corporation, state of, or town of, or county of. You didn't have to pay an extortion fee every year because you owned it. You didn't have to get permission from all these alphabet agencies to improve your property because you owned it. But you don't own it, do you? You have a certificate of title on your deed, don't you? And a certificate is bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use something of value. This is why, if you look at your standing on your deeds, you are either a tenant, a joint tenant, or a tenant in common. But either way, you are merely a tenant. You own nothing. Zero. Nothing. Who does own that? Bank of International Settlements, Basel, Switzerland. So Deutsche Bank pays $7.2 billion to the Department of Just Us, and the agreement in principle announced by Deutsche Bank's Frankfurt headquarters early Friday morning offers some relief to the German lender. What a crock. There was no stress. Zero. Now, Barclays PLC, they've just reached a settlement of $46 billion with DOJ. Now, you must be thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. No, it ain't. Not when you're making trillions, not when you're getting billions and trillions in bailout money for being a crook. Folks, I don't have the time to go through the whole thing, but I will tell you right now, Goldman Sachs, $5 billion deal. JP Morgan, $13 billion deal. Bank of America, $16.65 billion deal. Citicorp, $7 billion deal. I mean, folks, you know, the whole thing is corrupted. The whole thing is dirty. The whole thing is bleeding our people. And you own nothing. And what you have in your pocket, what you think is a dollar, which is not a dollar, because a dollar is 25.8 grains of gold and a 51 ratio of silver, you have a Federal Reserve note in your pocket. And what's a note? An acknowledgement of debt. And that's why there's an interest bond due on each and every one of them little things you got in your pocket that is nothing but an irredeemable note piece of paper. So if there's an interest bond due on the first one and you print another one to cover the interest bond due on the original one, what happens? Now the debt just doubled. Well, now we're going to print 4 to cover the original 2. Well, now it quadrupled. What happened? The debt just quadrupled. It's perpetual debt. It was designed that way, folks. Debt is a tool. It's a crushing tool. I mean, if I read all the, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, all of these things that these pigs have paid, that's what they're called here in this article. They sell crap and they're pigs. And this language was when Greg Lippman told colleagues that many homeowners, banks, was packaging in his securities were purely crap, and they are pigs, according to a 2011 U.S. subcommittee report. Unbelievable. Oh, and listen to this. With Deutsche Bank, the Justice Department was demanding a $14 billion penalty. But they negotiated. They negotiated to the $7.2 billion. How does that work? If you get caught parking illegally, jaywalking, smoking marijuana, whatever, do you negotiate with the lawman? When you go to court, do you negotiate with the British Accreditation Registry, who controls all of our courts? And by the way, my friends, that's why attorneys, to separate one from one's property, that's why attorneys are called esquires, a title of British nobility, because they swear allegiance to the British Accreditation Registry, which controls our courts. And that's why, my friends, we have a commercial law system and not a common law system. And yes, that all took place in 1933. So the Department of Just Us actually allowed this negotiation, and they cut their fines in half that, by the way, you paid for anyway. Unbelievable. Okay, here's some good news. George Soros has lost over $1 billion following the Trump election win. Billionaire hedge fund manager and major Hillary Clinton backer George Soros has lost over $1 billion in stock since President Donald Trump won the White House. And I'm going to tell you how. I haven't researched this real hard, friends, but I'm going to tell you why he lost all this money in the stock market. Because he was expecting Hillary to win because the rig was in. The rig was in. And so what he did was he shorted a lot of companies thinking that they were going to short lose value. Well, they didn't. It went up because people are enthusiastic about what Trump's trying to do. Now, if you're stuck in the divide paradigm left and right, and you're on the left, you're saying, oh, we're not excited. Well, that's because you're too ignorant and you're too indoctrinated to be excited. So what you got to understand is that the good news is George Soros has lost over $1 billion. Does that hurt him? I'm sure it does. Does it hurt him badly? No. But it hurts him enough. Enough to make me smile. Because here's a man who was taking possessions of children that were going into internment camps. You know them as labor camps in Hungary and Poland when he was 14 years old. And what did he say about that time? It was the best time of my life, quote, unquote. Unbelievable. Again, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to get into that too deep. Speaking of Mr. George Soros, radical leftists target D.C. Metro rail line and block inauguration access. This actually happened this morning, my friends. Far-left agitators are reportedly, this article is written past tense from yesterday, but it's happening this morning, planning to block access to the 2017 presidential inauguration by disabling the Washington, D.C. Metro line, a potentially terrorist act which may constitute a federal offense. Gee, you think? The latest sting video covertly filmed by Project Veritas. And if you don't know what the word Veritas means, that is Latin for truth. Leaders from several left-wing organizations conduct training workshops informing comrades how anti-inauguration events will proceed. Disrupt J20 organizer, that's the name of the group. Oh, who funds this group? The guy you see on the screen, George Soros. Same guy who funds Black Lives Matters, MoveOn.org. Well, you say, wait a minute, Tom. A white guy can't be financing Black Lives Matters. Oh, yes, they are. Because everyone who goes along with Black Lives Matters is being used as a weapon of disruption. Now, these people, and George Soros gave them quite a healthy pay raise, by the way, because George Soros, during the election process, was paying MoveOn.org and Black Lives Matter $15 an hour to go out and disrupt the peace. Now, if you and I did that, we'd be in prison. We'd be on the front page of every paper in the country. But this is George Soros. So George Soros, to make sure he could get enough numbers and enough people out there to do all this, has given everybody a pay raise from $15 an hour to $50 an hour to go out and riot and create mayhem. Now, if you and I did this, where do you think we'd be? But I have a thought, especially with Black Lives Matter. I would say at least, and I'm being conservative, at least 80% of them people are on welfare. Well, they got jobs now. Some are making $15 an hour. Some are making $50 an hour. They have jobs now. I say we get them off the welfare rolls. They got jobs. They're employed. Get them off the welfare rolls. Oh, and by the way, let's prosecute them for not reporting they got jobs and going off the welfare rolls like they are supposed to do by law. So let's film all these anarchists, all these nihilists. Let's film them. Let's identify them. Let's find out if they are on the public dole and if they are on welfare. Let's prosecute them and cut their benefits. Thank you very much, Mr. George Soros. You could actually save this country millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, let us continue in the latest sting video covertly filmed by Project Veritas, Project Truth. Leaders from several left-wing organizations conduct training workshops informing comrades how anti-inauguration events will proceed. One Disrupt J20 organizer, Legba Karifu, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, no disrespect, I may not be, explains the protest will consist of several, and folks, I can't use his language, cluster blockades where we are going to blockade all major ingress points in the city, which they can include shutting down major bridges and highway access to points, as well as shutting down the metro rail system. That's what they started this morning, my friends. You could go on the internet and find pictures of these people, and there's hundreds of them. So to do that, we are going to break into several teams, kind of like checkpoints. So fears in doing that, we don't think that these are going to be necessary arrestable actions, but there is a possibility that you may be arrested. Don't worry about that. They'll get you out of prison. And if you create enough mayhem, there is a $2,500 benefit coming to you on top of the $50 an hour. Now, again, running out of time. I would say that an undercover Project Veritas reporter then asked, I'm sorry, I got to back up, folks. I went ahead of myself here. Ask if the protesters should engage in throat punching. Smash Racism co-founder Mike Isaacson. Generally speaking, Nazis will only actually attack people if they have strongly outnumber them, because Nazis are essentially cowards. Bring it. Throat punching is probably a good thing. Folks, I took Kempo Karate, I boxed, Aikido, and I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, and in the medical field for 40 years. And I will tell you something, you can crush someone's windpipe, their larynx, their trachea, all of it with throat punching. Throat punching is a deadly act. And who are they calling Nazis? You and I. Because we support the change that Donald Trump is purporting to bring to our nation. I would say that's where you go out and do the most throat punching. I'm going to be honest with you. Isaacson responds. Now, the latest video, another undercover Project Veritas released Monday, in which members of the DC Anti-Fascist Coalition Folks, what is a fascist? A fascist is corporatism. It's when corporations control government. See, the Nazis, the difference between the Nazis in Germany and what's going on here in this country is that the Nazis in Germany controlled the corporations. Yes, it was American bankers that financed the Nazi movement, which we've gotten into many times, but the government still controlled the corporations. In this country, my friends, it's been reversed, topsy-turvy. The corporations control the government. And we live in true fascism today in this country. But they're calling us fascist. In this video, this claim that they would be deploying butyric acid during a celebration known as the Deplorable Ball, scheduled for January 19th. After its members were accused of criminal acts, the leftist group released a statement claiming that they were of Project Veritas efforts and were in fact engaged in a counter-sting operation where they spoke of false plans in order to protect themselves and will not discuss their real intentions. You know what that is? That is trying to save yourself. My friends, butyric acid can hurt your lungs and your airway, but what it really does, butyric acid is in your stomach. It is what gives vomitus that old too familiar smell. So what they were trying to do, they were going to put this in the air conditioning and heating vents, and then they were going to get people not only disruptive to get rid of the deplorable ball, but they were going actually to make a stampede and people get hurt. Do you think they will be prosecuted? Absolutely not. They are protected by the bankers who control the government. Let us continue. U.S. Intelligence Director James Clapper lies to Congress again. This smiling profiteer of corruption is the CIA Director James Clapper. Just as the first casualty of war is said to be the truth, the first casualty of the new war, Cold War, is irony. Our most prominent journalists seem to have missed the Orwellian irony story of John McCain asking the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, at Friday's Senate hearings meeting if Julian Assange has any credibility. That's funny. Assange has maintained that hacked or leaked emails of the Democratic officials do not come from the Russian government or any other government for that matter. As is well known, Clapper lied to Congress about a serious violation of the constitutional rights of tens of millions of Americans. This lie is a crime for which he actually could have been prosecuted for. In March of 2013, Clapper falsely answered no, sir, to the question, does the National Security Agency collect any type of data at all on millions or even hundreds of millions of Americans? He answered absolutely no. What did we find out a year later? That they are keeping records on everybody, on every resource they have. From his own writing. He was part of the program to not only, he didn't implement it, but to continue it and strengthen it and keep it secret from you and I. He was under oath. Obviously, the man has no faith in God. His word means nothing, and he has no honor. But did the Just Us system prosecute this scumbag? Absolutely not. If you were found lying under oath in one of the British Accreditation Registry's magistrate hearings, do you think you would go home that day? I guarantee you wouldn't. I guarantee you'd be in prison. This guy has lied to Congress and the American people on at least 12 events that I can come up with. And unfortunately, again, I'm running out of time. Clapper lied again in Friday's testimony, saying that Assange was under an indictment for a sexual crime. In fact, Assange has not been indicted for anything. And by the way, the sexual crime has been proven to be a complete facade. And the government of Sweden has never even charged him with any crime after he was questioned by Swedish police, found innocent, and allowed to leave the country. In reality, Assange is a political prisoner, and the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has found that he has been arbitrarily detained since 2010 by the United States, United Kingdom, and then Sweden ordered his release with compensation. He has offered from the beginning of his political prosecution to cooperate with the Swedish officials in any investigation and to be interviewed at any time in London. But he cannot safely travel to Sweden without any guarantees that he would not be sent to the United States, where he currently faces a high likelihood of imprisonment, even before any trial, for having been published leaked documents that exposed U.S. war crimes and corruption and embarrassments. Folks, I'm going to stop right here. This article gets into a little bit about the lying of Clapper, and it also gets into the understanding that the CIA and the NSA have zero evidence of Russian tampering into the DNC. So, my friends, just unbelievable. The lies continue, the corruption continues, the under the table deals continue, the negotiating of fines by these international bankers continue, and you continue to pay them with your sweat equity, with your labors. And you pay them because as a people, we are ignorant, we are apathetic, and we are cowards. And now the silent majority is beginning to not only awaken, they are starting to ask questions. They are starting to see what predicament we are in. And all these answers bring more questions. And eventually these questions will bring actions. Now, I'm very excited of the fact that Mr. Donald Trump had a 2-hour meeting with Judge Napolitano yesterday, and I do not watch Fox News. I don't watch TV at all, but it is. I have read both of his books. It is my hope that this gentleman right here, Donald Trump, will entertain the thought of putting Judge Napolitano in the place of murdered Judge Scalia. Okay, folks, I'm going to try to read this article to you, but before we do that, I want to say a couple of things real quick with Donald Trump. If I was Donald Trump, what's the first 3 things I would do? The first thing I would do was I would have a national day of prayer. And encompassed into all that, I know on Saturday they're having a massive church service, and I'm hoping that Donald Trump is bringing forth that Christianity is under a major assault by these international bankers and through the Muslim nihilist, Islamic, I shouldn't say Muslim, but Islamic nihilist, all being financed through George Soros, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and so forth. That is the first thing I would do. The other thing I would do, and I would bring someone who is very much a devout Christian, and I would cleanse the White House, because it has been occupied by Satanists since the Bush administration. I'm talking about the first Bush administration. They are complete Satanists, 100% Satanists. They are eugenics, they're Satanists, they're liars, they're murderers, all of it. I would cleanse the White House completely, spiritually. And folks, if you just think that our little tiny 3-dimensional world is it, you are really cutting yourself short on the realities of the universe. We're very limited, my friends, on what we can see and perceive at this lower realm of existence. The second thing I would do, if I was Donald Trump, is I would begin, whether he uses the internet, in education format to educate the American people about who and what the Federal Reserve is and what it is not, and how it was put into play, and how it debted our nation, how we don't own anything, the whole thing. Now, I know the American people have a hard time even reading today. And I'm not being facetious. That's statistically true. My God, you You couldn't play a game of crib with kids today with Common Core math. Oh, by the way, I am still asking a teacher or school administrator to come on this program and qualify Common Core. Please do. And you better do it quick, because as of January 20th, Common Core is going to be going bye-bye thanks to the likes of Donald Trump. And the NEA is shaking in their boots. I would do that, my friends, and the third thing I would do once that education process is completed, and because you can't act on ignorance. Once that is completed, I would propose a bill to the Congress to take away the issuing power of the private for-profit Federal Reserve Bank, and I would issue, as Abraham Lincoln and JFK tried to do. Actually, Lincoln did it. JFK tried to do it. I would issue non-interest-bearing scrip by the United States government, and I would make that scrip the only thing payable for taxes. That takes away the power of these international bankers. And along with point number 3, I would begin a serious prosecution, like the country of Iceland did, of all these criminal actors. We're going to get into that more next week, but just real briefly, I could get into this in depth. That's what I would do if I was Donald Trump. Speaking of Donald Trump, the gentleman that you see right here, his name is Roger Stone. He is a devout American patriot. He has been involved from Richard Nixon all the way through with Republican campaigns. He is a true American, my friends. He understands what is going on. He understands the powers to be, who's behind it. He has been fighting these people literally since the late 1960s all the way through. From books, speaking appearances, fomenting campaigns, exposing corruption. This man has been in the forefront of it for decades. And you're probably saying, gee, I've never heard of him. Now ask yourself, why do you think it is you've never heard of him? Because you're getting your information from the mainstream media. And you've been indoctrinated through the public fool system. That's why you've never heard of him. Well, recently, and Roger Stone is heavily, heavily involved with the Trump campaign. I want to read this article to you. And as I'm reading this article to you, I want you to think of Louis T. McFadden. Louis T. McFadden, who fought valiantly against the Federal Reserve from 1912 to the 1930s, was finally poisoned to death. That's what his autopsy says. After 2 other attempts to take his life, he was finally poisoned to death. Louis T. McFadden, one of my American heroes. And you're probably saying, gee, I've never heard of him. A congressman of 30-something years? Chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee? Never heard of him? Why? Because you're getting your information from the mainstream media and the public fool system. Former Trump advisor Roger Stone, recently targeted for assassination, revealed on Tuesday. The renowned Republican operative says he was usually very healthy, but became violently ill unexpectedly several weeks ago. I am generally a healthy person, he says. I have been a runner and a weightlifter all my life. I am very careful in my diet. I am a user of the InfoWars supplements. I have been treated for acupuncture by perhaps the greatest acupuncturist in the state of Florida, if not in the entire United States, Stone told radio host Alex Jones. Stone went on to describe that his symptoms presented themselves first as a routine stomach virus, and then he eventually grew exceedingly ill. So I ultimately went to the doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami Beach with my own personal physician. They conducted extensive blood tests. Those blood tests were then passed on to the CDC. Now listen to what the doctor told, these doctors told Roger Stone. The consensus is that I was poisoned. I was poisoned with a substance that may have been, was poisoned with a substance that may have been polonium or had the characteristics of polonium. This has made me exceedingly ill. The conjunction of all these doctors is that I fortunately did not receive a large enough dose to kill me. Folks, polonium-210 is a radioactive, these are my notes. Polonium-210 is a radioactive substance that releases extremely alpha particles throughout the body, producing cancer-causing free radicals. It has been used in numerous high-profile assassinations, including the recent one of former KGB spy Alexander Litvinenko, and was also suspected in the death of former PLO leader Yasser Arafat. My friends, I'm not going to have the time to get into this, maybe next week, but I want to continue about this. Folks, the people of the bankers and the New World Order alike are very much in a corner. And this makes them extremely dangerous. Because, as I've said to you before, they have consolidated all the power into the executive branch. The Constitution, checks and balances no longer exist. Flat out. They want you to believe it does, but it doesn't. For instance, executive orders were never meant to create law or policy. They were meant that in times of emergency, the commander-in-chief, the president, could delegate orders directly to federal employees. Now, mind you, when the Constitution was written, there was 3 departments of the federal government. 3. Now, there's hundreds. And there's millions of federal employees. But Obama and many others, Lincoln was the first to do it. FDR took it to a whole nother level. LBJ did it. Bushes did it. Clintons did it. Bushes did it. Obama's done it. Obama's done it more than anybody. Have used executive orders to create policy and or, I hate using the word legislation, because legislation is a process of representation that you are voted on by representatives of the people, held accountable to the people. That no longer exists. So Trump has, and Obama moving all these tanks and brigades and regiments has, and missile brigades, has completely surrounded Russia. Completely. And if it was not for the fact, and I am certain of this, if it was not for the fact that Trump won the election, I truly believe we would be at World War III right now, my friends, because Putin is being patient. He is waiting to see if Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do. I personally believe he is. Otherwise, I would have never voted for him. And I hope I'm not wrong, and I'm praying I'm right. We would be at World War III if Hillary Clinton got in, my friends. And I'm not saying that Obama is not going to start World War III, because we just moved, last week, we moved a lot of special forces into the regions of Poland and other regions, Romania and others. And special forces do a lot of covert operations, if you understand what I'm saying. So let's pray to God. And for those of you that are insulted by that, don't watch the program anymore. I'm sorry. But let us pray to God that what Trump says he's going to do, he does in full faith. And let us hope that the American people don't get apathetic and say, okay, we got our guy in, now we can sit back on our couch. Because Trump cannot do it, we collectively have got to do it. My friends, we are extremely thankful that you take your time from your busy day, because they certainly have us the rat in the wheel, to watch our program. We always ask you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close on reminding you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.